Good evening. I'm Michele Cobb, publisher of AudioFile Magazine, the #1 source for audiobook reviews in the world. And in fact, I am in the world. I'm coming to you from London, from the London Book Fair. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone back to Murder by the Mic. I love saying that because I love saying murder. This is a series of conversations co-hosted by Novel Suspects, Hachette Audio, and AudioFile Magazine. And I am looking forward to a great chat with tonight's guests. And we're going to leave time for your questions. So be sure to pop them into the question box as you think of them, and we will cover them at the end. That's the question box. That's where you want to put them. So let me take a moment to introduce the people you have really come to see and hear, Sandra Brown and KYF Brewer. Sandra Brown is the author of Blood Moon, which came out just a week ago, March 4th. She is the author of 76 New York Times bestsellers. Wow. She's published over 80 novels and has upwards of 80 million copies of her books in print worldwide. She's served as the president of Mystery Writers of America. And in 2008, she was named Thriller Master, the top award given by the International Thriller Writers Association. Other honors include the Texas Medal of Arts Award for Literature and the Romance Writers of America Lifetime Achievement Award. And KYF Brewer, his music career took off with the Ravens and the hit Raised on the Radio from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. He then fronted Company of Wolves, charting rock singles and MTV videos. And Keith, in fact, hosted 41 episodes of VH1's Before They Were Rock Stars. His songs featured in shows like Dawson's Creek and The Office, and he has also narrated multiple books by authors such as David Baldacci, James Patterson, and Nicholas Sparks. Welcome to both of you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Michele.
Now, we were talking before we came on, but I want you to tell us, some authors and narrators who work together on projects interact with each other. And it's become a bit of a tradition here to ask our author and our narrator, was that the case with you? Have you ever met and interacted before? And if you have met, have you ever met in person? Who wants to take that?
We have never met in person, but
We've never met in
I know this person.
It started several years ago. I had a narrator who got ill and could no longer do the narrations for my books, and so I'm sort of a picky person, and so I said, "Well, who am I going to get to narrate?" And Hachette Audio suggested KYF Brewer, and I said, "Okay." They sent me samples, and I said, "But I'm from the South, and I know that comes as a shock, but I come from Texas, and most of my books are either set here or in the South." And I said, that kind of accent, even for the best of actors, can get really corny sounding. So is there any way possible I could talk to him? And they said, "Oh, I think you'd be agreeable to that." So they set up a phone date with us, and then we talked for a while and got to know each other. And ever since, we've been text friends, but we've never met in person, which I'd love to. You were going to come to Delaware one time, but you didn't get to. Yeah, you were close.
I was looking at your tour and trying to figure out where I could catch you, but I do some touring too, so we haven't crossed yet. That's all. We will.
But what I really impressed me about KYF, because when we started talking about the book that was that first one, and I asked him, have you ever read The Southern Accent? And he, was telling me yes, he had. But I said, well, about the villain and about the hero and about the heroine, this is the way that I hear them. What really impressed me, he said, well, I read the whole book before I ever start the character reading. And so I knew that going in, he was going to be acquainted with these characters, and would have in his own mind as an actor how he would portray them. And so that really impressed me that he would know before the book started who the real villain was, and he would be able to kind of integrate that villainy into his narration.
Yeah, that
Absolutely.
if I didn't do that, I would, and when I was learning how to do this craft, like many years ago, I had to start a couple of books over again many years ago because I get to a point and I'd say, "Oh, this isn't this is the villain. Oh no." So yeah, I've learned. But anyway, thank you, Sandra. And I think like, just to return what she said, I'm always very relieved when the author likes what I do with the accents because, you know, I mean, if I were an author and I was sight unseen, I'd be scared to death until I heard it.
Well, I was
Well, when
telling you both
I,
before,
what,
like this listen for me has changed my relationship a bit with Southern audiobooks. I love the pace of it and the sound of it because I can't read that accent with my eyes. And turns out I haven't read a lot of Southern books with my eyes, but I will now listen to them. So thank you for that.
Cool.
So we should do a little bit of synopsis of this title. Now, when it's a mystery, you don't want to give too much away. And
Mhm.
Blood Moon has only been out for a week, so people have just picked up this book in print or just downloaded the audiobook or just streamed the audiobook these days. Can you tell us a little bit about the book, Sandra, without giving it all away?
well, I won't give much away, but I really came up with the title first, and that is the first. And all of this was my 87th book, and very rarely do I get the title this soon. And but it was actually a book was due to be talked about. A publisher was waiting on something, and so that phrase just came to my mind, Blood Moon. And I thought, ooh, how good that would look on a book cover, the double alliteration and all of that. And so I called my editor and I said, you're going to love this. I have a title. He said, oh gosh, this is great, because sometimes they're about to go to print before I actually get one. And I said, Blood Moon. And he said, oh, I just got cold chills. What's the
Mm.
story about? I said, I have no idea. So he said,
So you had the title first?
details. Yeah.
You had the title first before you wrote the book? Wow.
And he said, oh, details, And so I was like, what is a blood moon anyway? And it's actually a thing that's going to happen next Thursday night.
Really?
Yes, this Thursday night. What's today? It happens Thursday night, March 13th, 14th. That night is going to be our first blood moon in 3.5 years. The last one occurred when this book is set, and they're talking about the next blood moon. Um, so I had to look it up first of all, and then the more research I did, I really got interested in it. But very quickly, it's when the Earth gets between the sun and a full moon in perfect alignment to where the disk of the Earth covers the disk of the moon. And it turns red or orange because the sun is being filtered through the Earth's atmosphere. And so it has to be that particular alignment and to be called a blood moon. It is an eclipse, and we will have totality in some areas of the United States this Thursday night. So yeah, here in Texas, it occurs at 1:30 in the morning. So I'm going to sit up and watch it. But I really got the title, and then it's about a burned out detective and the hostess or a producer for a true crime show called Crisis Point. and they come together and realize that someone's been doing something terrible on the night of blood moons, and they've got 4 days to figure out who that terrible person is before he does something even more terrible. And so it's a ticking clock counting down to the blood moon.
Should we be worried about this Thursday?
Well, I
It's
don't
time, yeah.
know.
Yeah. I'll be
Well, thank you.
texting you.
There you go. Thank you for that little synopsis. And Keith, I have to ask you, because we've heard about your background, which is clearly, a long career as a musician. So before you talk about narrating Blood Moon, tell us, how did you actually start narrating audiobooks?
Um, well, I was a singer for many years, and I moved to New York City in the 80s to seek out another record deal. I'd been dropped from a label. And, you know, on the way, somebody asked me to sing a jingle, and I sang a jingle. And I sang and ended up singing many, many jingles in the 80s. And then somebody asked me to read that little hole, which is, we call it the donut, the announcer part. And I read it and they said, "Who's your agent?" And I said, "I don't have one." And they said, "Oh, you do now." So I was very, very fortunate. And through that and through voiceovers, eventually I found my way in the 90s to audiobooks. And so there you go. Here I am.
Well, we're
That's
glad to have you.
that's
Yeah,
great.
I'm glad to be here.
So obviously you read Blood Moon before you narrated it, but
Yeah.
how else did you prepare? And then I'm curious, what aspects of the story did you focus on as you thought about it to really bring it to life for us?
Well, I think, you want to do the same thing that the author is doing. You want to keep the secret, until
Yes.
it's revealed. So you give those characters just enough leeway to become characters for you, without, making this one too suspicious, or maybe this one is a little suspicious because maybe you want to, like, throw them off the track. And that's the way I look at it. And just I picked my good guys, who were obviously John and Beth, and his daughter and so forth, and my bad guys were like her boss, who, was kind of an ass. And can I say ass? I already
Yeah,
did.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You have my permission.
He was kind of an ass, but anyway. Anyway, there's some surprise as far as the characters. I think this is a good book, as far as revealing the surprise. Like later on, you go like, "Oh wow, okay."
Thank you
So
for that.
did I answer that?
You
You did.
did. You did.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Um,
And I'm curious, Sandra, tell us a little bit more about the setting of the novel, and then what research did you do specifically about that area? Obviously, you live in the
well,
South.
that area is, across the state line from me, but it's still a totally, completely different culture. I live in Fort Worth, it's the cowboy culture, but this is a different culture entirely, but I love it. And I have good friends who live in the New Orleans area, and so been down there, a lot. And I just love the food. I love the atmosphere. If you've ever taken, a swamp tour, it's like you're in another world. It's like you're in a movie set. Does this really exist? And I think it just lends itself to this kind of book. And when I started thinking about all the mysticism, the scary, spooky stuff, end of times kind of thing that some cultures historically have attached to the blood moon, I thought, what better place than here? When it's already otherworldly. And so it was a given from the get go when I first started plotting the story that it was going to be set in Louisiana and that they were going to be, in this this dreary, gray, monochromatic, and the blood moon was going to be, the thing to see. So I do a lot of research down there, but I also go to eat and drink and have a good time because they do know how to party. And so I love that culture. So that's why I said it there. But in any book, and I think Keith can probably, validate this, is that, and I'm because I know he reads it that way, is that the setting should be another character of the book. It lends itself so much if you set that stage for the reader, and you don't have to just immerse them in it, you don't have to overdo it, but in just the way that the characters react to it, their fear of it or their love of it, or their hesitancy to get involved with it, as Beth does in Blood Moon. But it has to have a personality of its own. And I appreciate Keith's attention to that detail, that when you set that stage, you want it to be spooky, or you want it to be happy, or whatever the setting is. You want to reflect that not only in word, but in the audio.
Yes, I have to say one of the fun things for me about this was I was actually in New Orleans listening to some of it. So I
Oh,
felt really sort of steeped in it in a very interesting way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now I have to ask you, Sandra, because this book is about a teenager who disappeared 3 years ago, and it's, that television series that sprouts up around the case. So you've told us that you started with the title, but was any of this ripped from the headlines, or is it completely fictional?
it's all fictional. And I kind of make it up as I go along. I started with the bar scene, uh, chapter one.
Yep.
And at that point, I really didn't know everything that was going to happen. I never know everything that's going to happen. And I started this scene with him walking in, and until Beth says her first line, which is, "Bartender, put that on my tab," you don't even know that she's there. So you're seeing him from her point of view, but you don't know whose point of view it is yet until you hear her say that line. I didn't know she was there until she said that line, and then I finished the scene, and then when she says the last line of chapter one is, "It's going to happen again," um, and I thought, that should hook the reader. That should be the question that I plant in their mind early on, is what's going to happen again? And then will it happen again? And from that starting point, then I have only 400 other pages to fill with something.
Now, do you think about a length as you're doing the writing?
Well, I try to keep my first draft to about 400 pages, and then typically the manuscript goes in at about 425. But it's more of a publishing thing. If it ended at 350 pages, that would be all right. But contractually, I'm supposed to deliver a book between 100 and 125,000 words. So I know, about the length, but really I tell my story. And some may come out shorter or longer than others just because it took that long to tell the story. The characters tell the story. I put them in a terrible position and then kind of let it evolve organically as they go along.
Well, and I have to say that the hook at the end of chapter one totally had me. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I don't get credit for it. The characters get credit for it.
Well, let's talk about the characters a little with Keith. Sandra Brown's characters are obviously complex and nuanced. So I'm curious, how did you approach playing the emotional depth and the motivation for the characters. You talked about doing, villains or not villains, but what else are you bringing into it?
Well, and Sandy, I don't know whether you set this up. I think you did, because I think you've been doing this long enough. But in the first chapter, I knew something was going to happen between those two, and you kind of sort of, you feel that coming. Like there's they didn't like each other when they first met, but you could tell that there was some sort of attraction. And I just tried to pull that out because I kind of felt it coming.
Well, that's kind of a Sandra Brown trademark, I think, and I work hard on the tension, creating the tension immediately, when the two
Yeah,
people meet. And as you said, Keith, and you pick up on it easily, is that they're, first of all, he wants nothing to do with her when he finds out,
right.
why she's there. And she just keeps, hounding. And even after, the first time they separate, he can't get that off his mind and what she said. And so I just call it, they bug each other. And that's good chemistry, when they bug each other. And she's thinking about him, what a jerk he is, and then he's thinking about, why did she tell me that? I don't want to talk about that case that I couldn't
Mhm.
solve, that ruined my life. Why is she this irritant all of a sudden? And
Mhm.
he even says in one point, you may remember this line where he says, she could upset the apple cart that was now his life. And so it was, that was kind of his way of thinking, is that if I get involved with her, it ain't going to be good.
Mhm.
Uh, it's yeah, I've been doing this for a while, but it's never easy. And you have to come up with two more characters who have, that same attraction, but the key is that has to be forbidden for whatever reason. Um, it has to be. It can't be easy, or you don't have a story. It has to be difficult.
That makes
Right.
sense. Now, without giving any spoilers, I'm curious, were there any scenes that were particularly difficult to write or any that were particularly rewarding?
Are you asking me
Yeah, for you, yeah.
to write? They're all difficult to write, and as Keith can attest, there are a lot of characters in this book, a lot of moving parts, and when it, you, as you said, you defined the good people and the protagonist and the antagonist pretty early on. I find the hardest scenes to write are when there are numerous characters in the scene and you're trying to stay true to each one of them, but you can only write it, at least I only write it, for one point of view. So if you're in John's head, the hero, you're telling it from your point of view, but the villain is the hero of his own story. So then when you're in Barker's head, it has to be how he would think things. And so when there are a lot of characters and I'm moving them around, and there are several in the scene either arguing or whatever they're doing, or just getting through time and space, those are the scenes I find harder to write. When it's like dialogue between Mitch and John, his best friend Mitch, or Beth and John, or if it's one on one and it's just dialogue, I love those scenes
Mhm.
because and you may find them the hardest because you're having to switch your voices. But for me, I just kind of listen to them and write down what they say. And I
Mhm.
like for them to talk in a shorthand without any or as few attributives as I have to use. The he said, she said gets really old. And so if you're writing it right and you're using the right words, you know which character is talking without being told by the author who said that, and every once in a while you throw in one just to keep it, clear. But I can understand as a narrator, I don't know if I could, because I'm hearing it, but I don't know if I could do it in voices the way you do. I know I couldn't do it in
Well,
voices.
well, probably, and this isn't even that difficult, but probably the most difficult thing that I had with this book was finding enough voices for those people, like,
Right.
Tom Barker and Frank. They worked together, but they had to sound different. So I
Right.
had to give one a personality. I actually did it real quick. I actually did a book for
Tell us.
somebody else, a murder thing, and it was, oh my God, there were like 5 different people on this SWAT team, and they were all from different countries. And they had these conversations sometimes where I had to go from Venezuelan to Middle Eastern to and so that's why when I text you, Sandy, and I say, "I love reading for you," because you don't do that. Anyway, no, I get your
Well,
point.
of course, you just invited me to do it. So
Okay, well, just know that I've done it before, and I'll do it again for you.
Well, you heard it here first. There's going to be a difficult dialogue scene with at least 5 characters for
Yeah,
Keith.
yeah, your listeners will go like, "Oh, okay, this is what she was talking about." That guy.
So, Keith, in this particular book, what was the most difficult character for you to create, and why was that?
Um, the most difficult character, I think, was the villain, and, he
Mhm.
happens later in the book, so I don't wanna give away too much.
Yes.
But I had established all these other people, so this villain had to be somebody different, and, so, yeah, I'm not gonna say anything else, but that's
All right, well, then who was the most fun to create?
most fun was probably John Bowie.
Yeah.
Molly was great to his daughter because she was a typical teenager, and I have 3 daughters, and I just used them with Southern accents. But, but no, John's deep, man, 'cause he's got a dark side. He's had some paint thrust upon him by his ex-wife, and, he also, and then he's in love, and then he's also a very deep thinker because he's figuring out this mystery. So, that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun reading
He
him.
was he was very broody. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
I saw him as very broody and as you said, a deep thinker, and to everyone else's kind of annoyance because he really gets analytical about things and he takes everything so personally. And when I was creating John, I didn't know he was going to be this way, but in fact, I don't ever feel like I create anything. I just report on them because the character comes out. But what I what I really in afterthought when I started thinking about it is that we explore so many relationships in John's life. We
Mhm.
explore the relationship with Molly, his daughter, the relationship with his ex-wife, the growing relationship with Beth, the relationship with his best trusted, most loyal friend Mitch,
That
and
was
then his relationship with his boss, whom he despises, and who is an ass, as you said. And so, he has all of these different relationships, and he relates to each one of them in sort of a different way. But he's still a very broody kind
mm,
of individual, he thinks. And
mm.
I want everyone to pay close attention to Mitch because Keith, he'll be the next one you're reading. He's the hero of the next book.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, Mitch was a character too. He was
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And
good.
unlike John, he's the smartass. He's the jokester. He's the one with all the one-liners.
All the quips, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so he's the hero of the next one. So
Mm.
You
Cool.
can look forward to that. I hope you look forward to
I
it. You
will.
may have hated Mitch.
Absolutely.
Do you have a title for that one yet? Now, I'm always going to expect that you come up with the title first, right?
I do have a title, but I'm not going to disclose it yet. Yeah.
That's totally fair.
My editor and publisher have approved it, and my agent, but they're the only ones that know right now.
All right, you're
I'm just
holding a secret.
finishing that book, just finishing it. Yeah.
Excellent. So, Keith, a little follow-on question, especially when it comes to having 5 characters in a scene.
Mhm.
Do you do anything to the text to indicate a character change, or is it something that, you've just become so skilled you sort of read into it?
To the text.
Yeah, so as you're reading, like, from an iPad, do you highlight, put it into color
No,
so you know this character?
no, I'm very lazy. I just read it.
Or you're very skilled?
Well, okay, you can say that. I'll remain humble. But, no, I just read it, and, I mean, if it doesn't sound right, I mean, honestly, the last few that I've done with Sandra, I haven't had a producer. Because since COVID, everything's changed, and I do a lot of stuff right here in this magical room, and, if I don't like it or if I don't think it's gonna go, hopefully, I'm not too boastful in saying that I've done enough of these where I'll just stop and I'll do it again, So I don't really take notes.
Makes sense.
I don't have a highlighter. I don't own one.
Back in the old days, I remember they used to highlight right on the
Okay,
paper.
Oh, yeah.
I have a question. I have a
Yeah,
question because you said I could ask questions, right?
absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
please.
So, but I think you just kind of answered it because I've always wondered this is when you're reading it, do you take a weekend off? If you've read 15 chapters, do you take a weekend off before you start with chapter 16? Or do you and can you remember how you read one character from another, or do you read it 2 straight days in a row
No,
without
it's a
taking
g
a
that
break?
that's a good question. With your stuff, I mean, I just remember. I just
Yeah,
remember. Some of the stuff that I do, I have to go back and go, "Okay, what did I give this person? What did I give this person?" But with your stuff, I pretty much decide pretty quickly, you know, how this person's gonna act, yeah, and no, I try not to take a lot of time in between, I try to just let it flow.
just read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wondered that because as I know when I'm like right now, I'm like 3 chapters, maybe not even that far from finishing the book I'm writing, Mitch's book. And I've had to take off, these 2.5, 3 weeks to do publicity and tour and all of this for Blood Moon, which is essential and which I love doing. But I'm like, what are they doing while I'm not there? It's like, what are they up to? And I'm missing it. I know that sounds totally schizophrenic, but it's like when tour's over and I'm going to go away and lock myself in, and I don't do anything else except write until I
Mhm,
finish that book because
mhm.
I feel like I've abandoned them,
Yeah.
but I wonder, it's like when you left your children at home, it's like, what are they doing while I'm
What are
not
they
there?
doing?
What are they up to? And so in a way, I can't wait to get back and see
Yeah.
how all this ends up. So I just wondered if when you take a break like that, but I guess it's a different thing because you have something definite to come back to. It's
Yeah,
different.
it's a different thing, and of course, you've already written it, so
Yeah,
it's
right.
already there
So,
in front of me,
yeah,
The most I have to do sometimes is with the smaller parts, I have to go back when you refer to someone that hasn't been in a few chapters, sometimes I
right.
have to go back and listen to what I did
Mm,
with that
yeah,
person.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's not
I
that
can understand that. I can
yeah,
understand that.
that's not that difficult.
So, Sandra, when you return to writing the next book, Will you envision how your words might sound in an audiobook format, or particularly with Keith's voice in your head?
No, the only people I really listen to are my characters, and I see them. And it's a hard question because people say, "Well, who do you see playing this? What actor or actress were you thinking about?" And I go, "I wasn't. I was seeing my character." And so it's really hard for me to. I don't superimpose anyone's face on to my characters. They're them. And so I don't hear, but I do at some point, and you may notice this in when you see it in print, Keith, is that when I know how a character is emphasizing a word, I may put it in italics just so I know how I want I know where I want the emphasis to be. I don't want it to be on the wrong syllable.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I want that word to be the word that is stressed. And sometimes when, I'm reading a book, and I'll think, wait a minute, I read it one way, but I think the author meant it this, and you read it again with the emphasis on a different word, and it takes on an entirely different connotation.
Hmm.
So I do that, and I'm hoping, I hope the reader hears how I heard that character say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have imaginary friends. I play with them all day long.
Well, we're lucky because we
Hey,
benefit from what's going
yeah.
on
Oh,
in your head.
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
So now, Keith, you've obviously read this with your eyes, and you've read this to us. How would you say the audiobook version of Blood Moon differs from the experience of reading the physical book?
I don't listen to my own books.
That's fair.
The most I hear usually are the samples on the Amazon page or wherever, audiophile. I'll listen to that. And sometimes there's a minute, sometimes there's 3 minutes. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, all right. Other times I just turn it off. But I mean, if everyone else is happy with it, I just leave it alone. So
And Sandra, what elements of the book do you think are particularly well suited for the audiobook format?
Well, I think I provided Keith, and he's touched on this, with characters that are very complex. Each of these characters is kind of at a turning point in their lives. I mean, John's life has been shattered 3.5 years prior to when I opened the book, because it was the night of the blood moon in November of 2022 that, ruined his life, his career, personal life, everything has just gone downhill. And I don't know that I can say this, but he just doesn't give a shit anymore. And so he stalks into this bar, and now this woman is, impressing upon him the importance of, you've got to get involved again. It's the last thing he wants to do. So I wanted to create character that has an entire arc that starts one way and ends another way. And I think that that's what writing fiction is about. You take a hero on a journey, and there is an actual book that I use as my Bible of plotting called The Writer's Journey. And it's basic myth telling, where you put a hero in a terrible position, and it's up to them to solve the problem. But along the way, they learn a lot about themselves, and they come out differently in the end than they did in the beginning. And then Beth doesn't even know the turning point in her life yet that this is going to take, because she doesn't know things that happen in the plot, which I will not talk about right now, because I think they come as somewhat of a surprise. But she's a woman on a mission, And she's wanting to convince this very reluctant hero, you've got to do this. You've got to help me do it. And furthermore, I can't succeed unless you do. So that codependency. So I try to create characters that are in a terrible trouble, and they've got to figure it out by page 400. And I've got to figure it out by page 400 how they're going to solve this terrible trouble I put them into. But that's fiction 101, is giving heroes and heroines impossible situations that they have to solve. I'm getting a little tag here that says, do I hit accept again?
I did it too, but I'm afraid to touch anything because I'm afraid I'll hang up.
These are all tech questions. You seem fine, so I think you're good for the moment.
Okay. All right. So I'm getting a little signal here, but I'm not touching anything. Okay.
Well, the truth of the matter is I could talk to you both all night, but I do want to give our audience a chance to ask questions. So what I'm going to do is give them a moment to prep those and put those in the question box. I see we've got some there. But in the meantime, I'm going to give you each a chance to ask each other a question. So Keith, let's start with you. Do you have a question for Sandra?
We talk, so I don't have too many questions. I mean, honey, I just really trust that if something is wrong, you'll tell me. That's all. I hope that, I'm very pleased that you're pleased with what I do and bring life to these characters. And I thank you for doing it. I don't really have any questions except that how the hell did you write 87 books? I've written that many songs, but a lot of them are about the same thing.
Well, I can't imagine writing a song. And so I look at a songwriter, or I look at a painter or any other artistic endeavor, and it would be, foreign to me. And so when someone says, how did you do it? I don't know. And where do you get your ideas? I don't know. Why Blood Moon, that phrase popped into my mind? I don't know. I've started books with a prologue, not having any idea who those characters were, why they were in that situation, but I was just in a scene all of a sudden, and somebody would say something and I'd go, well, that's provocative. And I would start writing, and it just, would start unfolding. And then, as I said, I plant that question, but I want to know the answer too. And so I think if I'm wondering about these people, I have to hope that a reader will. But in terms of writing a song, I could never do that. And so I hate the word talent, because I look at you, I look at other people, my colleagues, and I say, gosh, that talent. And I don't think of it that way myself at all. I see myself as a yeoman. It just comes to work every day, shows up, and hopes that something happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like most of my talent is formulaic. I do verse, chorus, I do middle eight, stuff like that. But it seems like sometimes with you, like you just really enjoy, and I got this from David Baldacci too. You really enjoy storytelling.
It's the storytelling. It's getting the story out. Yeah.
And that is a wonderful talent to have.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you very much. I feel blessed for the longevity, for one thing, that I've had in this career, and to be able to do what I love to do, and that's play with my imaginary friends all day, and lie for a living, because every word I put on the page is a lie to the reader until
that's
they
the first thing you said to me. That is one of the first things you ever said to me. The
Did
first
I?
conversation we
Oh.
ever had, she said, I said, you got a great gig. She goes, yeah, I got a great gig, live for a living.
So it's I love the storytelling. I do. I
Mhm.
love
Yeah,
the writing part.
you can tell,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, the Q&A box is hot here, so I'm going to jump right in and say, Sandra, what book of yours was the most favorite of yours to write?
Whichever one you're going to buy. That
Oh,
was my favorite. It's the one I poured my heart and soul and blood into. No, it's impossible to say, but so I made up that little, funny thing to say when people ask that question. But it really is true. There are some books that I loved, the characters I loved. The books came easily. And then other books, and a lot of it depended on what was going on in my life at the time. Some were like pulling teeth, and I think, oh, nobody's going to want to read this crap. But then the next reader that I meet at a book signing will bring me that book and say, this was my favorite. This was the one I have read it 4 times. So I'm not a good person to ask that because a book is so subjective. You don't know why you love it or not love it, but whatever it was, that element that just really touched you, it may not have touched me that way, but if I conveyed that to you, then I've done my job for the day.
well, then we'll turn that to Keith and say, what book of Sandra's was your favorite to narrate?
I think we, I think we've done 4. Uh,
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
think.
think so.
I mean, this one, it was definitely the most attractive, I think. Um, eh, because of what you said earlier, because the minute you said to your publisher Blood Moon, they went, oh yeah, wow, what's that about? I mean, it just draws you in from the very beginning, and you're wondering, even when I was reading, like even the first chapter, I'm like, how's this gonna all come together? So I would have to say, and I know this is a cheap answer, but I was going to say it's got to be this one. This is my favorite one.
Thank you. Thank
Let's
you.
see, another endorsement to go out and run out and buy it
Yeah,
right now if you
right.
haven't done that.
Right. Absolutely.
So, Sandra, what other authors do you like to read?
Oh, that's another trick question because I read across the board. I read everything. I read David. I read all of my buddies that are thriller writers, romantic suspense. But then I read nonfiction. I read historical biographies, and I read historical romances. I read smut if I feel like it. I just read whatever I'm in the mood for at the time. But I've always got a book and a spare. I have to read on a iPad now because my eyes. It's really hard for me to read print, even my books in print, without having a spotlight on them. So I have a library, a vast library. And at any given time, if I finish a book, I've got another one I can always read. And so, but I used to pack a suitcase to go on vacation and have 6 books in it because, Lord forbid that I get somewhere and I finish a book and I don't have
Yeah.
another one. So I read everything, I read all the time every day. I read about almost as many hours a day as I write.
Wow.
Yeah.
All
Not
right.
quite, but almost.
Someone's only halfway through this one, but says it's so good. They have to ask already. Any talks of film adaptation?
Not at liberty to say at this point.
Totally fair. And someone
But
wants to know where they can get a signed copy of Blood Moon.
if they go on my website, I think there's contact info that you could just send me a book and I'll sign anybody's book that sends it to me. So
It's very
check the
gracious of
check
you.
the website for contact info. Yeah.
And you were saying that you often get reactions about your audiobooks. So have any reactions from your listeners stood out to you since the audiobook's release?
Well, I sent Keith just this week several that had shown up. I believe it was on the Goodreads, and the books and the book had gotten a lot of 5 stars, which I'm pleased to say. But a lot of the 5 stars were for the audio book because they said the narrator was amazing. And sometimes they will read, they'll be reading the book, but they'll be listening to it simultaneously. And I had several 5-star reviews that also mentioned the audio. So that's good for both of us, right?
That's wonderful to
Yeah,
hear.
yeah.
Absolutely. So, one person wants to know, uh, did you have any real life events or personal experiences that inspired this? I know it wasn't ripped from the headlines, but anything from your real life that you stole a little of? Still all in your head.
This is a frequently asked question when I do speaking engagements, and they'll say, "Do you draw off life experiences?" I always say, "Have you read the books?" No, I wouldn't have lived very long.
How many
Uh,
people in your life have been murdered?
right, really, or have I murdered? So I haven't killed anybody yet. And so no,
That you'll admit to.
it's all make believe. It's all make believe. The only book that I did draw a little bit tangentially was Rainwater, and it was a historical book set in the 1930s, the middle of the Depression, 1934 to be exact, in Central Texas, and it was an event that occurred in my daddy's life when he was 6 years old, and I kind of drew. He was a writer. He was an editorial writer, and he had written a story about this true event. And I'd read it as an adult, and I said, "Gosh, I never knew this ever happened." And it just kind of stayed with me, and so I fictionalized it in the book called Rainwater. If anybody's interested, but that still, it didn't happen to me.
So someone wants to know, Sandra, are you a mood reader? Do you pick a genre to read depending on your mood that day?
Yeah, yeah. I usually don't start a book until I've finished the one that I'm reading. But as I said, I read a lot of nonfiction as well as fiction, and I read in every genre. My criteria is tell me a story, whether it's true or fiction. I don't care if it's set on a wagon train or outer space. Just engage me in the characters. Just engage me in the characters. And if I've got someone to root for, then I'm in.
So then you talked about your next book. Will it be this year or next year? Because they're already ready to pre-order.
Give me a break. No, it'll be about this time next year. Yeah, about this time next year. They usually publish the hardcovers about a year apart. So sometime, I would say early spring next year.
And Keith, I think you said this, but how many of Sandra's books have you actually narrated?
I was
It's been
looking
more.
at it today. I think it was 4, which
Excellent.
seems like I've been doing it for a long time, but that's no. We've only known each other for 4 years,
Yeah, yeah.
something like that.
If someone says, Sandra, the tension in your books are always fire. How did you come up with all of that?
Well, if you read the spine, it says fiction.
But what was the one that started with the brilliant sex scene? I can't
No,
remember which one was that. That was maybe 2 books back. That
let's
was
see.
fire. That was if somebody didn't continue to read that, they were dead. They were brain dead. She had a
Can't
great
remember. I
I
can't
can't remember
remember
which
right
book it was, but you opened it up with like this, "Whoa." And I was like, "Wow."
Well, those scenes are they're they're just as difficult to write as every scene.
I'm sure.
Um, yeah, because I try to deal not so much on the, well, it is anatomical, but I try to deal with as much what is going on, in their mind and in their heart as I do, what's going on in their bodies, because uh, I do, I want to, the tension is harder to write than the actual
Mm.
love scene, because the tension is the complicated part, because it is all mind, it's what's going on, and you have to come up with ways to portray that chemistry.
Yeah.
The body parts, you kind of know already how that works, and so it's the chemistry that furthermore cannot be explained.
Mm.
I, nobody can explain what attracts one person from another person, and so it's what attracts you to someone. You can't explain it. I think. Oh, it was overkill,
I
Keith.
bet it was. Yeah.
The sex scene you're talking about.
And,
My my assistant here is holding it up, going.
oh,
It was
because when I'm
it
talking
was
about
over.
doing those little, reading those or listening to those little samples,
Yeah.
it started with that, and it was just, it was the sample, and I was like, wow.
Who could not read that book?
Yeah, who's not gonna buy this?
So
Overkill.
someone wants to know, how many books do you both read in a year? So Keith, let's start with you.
Me?
Yeah.
Um, I honestly, like, I'm embarrassed to say, I don't read that many books because I'm involved in so much that's musical. Um, y y I have books sitting on my table downstairs, and every once in a while, I'll get to a couple chapters, but I get interrupted, and so, I guess I'm better at, narrating them than reading them, quite
Well, how
honestly.
many do you narrate in a year?
How many do I narrate in a year? Uh, it really varies. I mean, sometimes like, right now, I'm in a series that I'm on, book 6 of, something called Wolfhounds. I mean, I'm not trying to advertise anybody else, but, uh,
No, that's great.
sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 2, it really depends, and I don't do as much as I did 20 years ago, but I'll put the quality in there.
And Sandra, with all your reading and the next book in line, about how many do you read in a year?
It would be hard to count. I would say I probably read at least a book a week, if not a little more. So I would probably say somewhere between maybe 60 and 75 books a year, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, I read at least once a week. I read every night, before I go to sleep, several hours. So that's when I get my reading time in.
That's
So
fantastic.
I would think it would be at least that many.
Wow. Well, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Well, hard to believe, but an hour has passed very quickly. So I want to thank everybody who's watching tonight. Thank you for joining us at Murder by the Mic. And thank you, Sandra and Keith, for sharing with us about what you do.
Oh, you're
We've
welcome.
got the links in the chat where you can find the audiobook, and it is available now because it came out last week, wherever you buy or borrow your audiobooks and books. So thank you both for coming.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you for that.
loved it. I loved it.
Thank you.
Thank
And I'll
you.
catch up with you, Sandra, somewhere.
Okay. All right. Yes. Please, we
Someday
got
you'll
to make
meet in
that
person.
happen.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
All
right,
right.
and Sandra,
Bye-bye.
we look forward to learning what the title of your next book is.
I hope we'll be here this time next year.
Thanks, everybody, and have a good night.